Have you ever caught yourself trying to fix your partner when, deep down, you know the real work might need to start with you? In this episode of Not Just a Story, I'm chatting with Kameran Alareqi about marriage, emotional regulation, vulnerability, humility, and self-accountability. It's a really relaxed conversation, but there's a lot in it to think about. We talk about how stress and perfectionism can show up as control, why we sometimes try to manage the people closest to us, and what can happen when we stop focusing on changing our partner and start paying attention to our own reactions, emotions and patterns. Kameran brings a very practical and down-to-earth perspective to relationships, and I think there are some valuable takeaways here for anyone who has ever found themselves stuck in the same relationship patterns.
Welcome to Not Just a Story with Rose Davidson, where lived experience becomes meaning and stories create impact.
Hello and welcome to Not Just a Story with Rose Davidson. My guest today is Kameran, all the way from the US, and we're going to be talking about all things marriage, emotional regulation, vulnerability, humility and self-accountability. Kameran is a Gottman certified marriage coach, the host of the Married and Connected podcast, and the founder of the Recognizing Potential coaching program. In this program, Kameran meets monogamous couples where they're at to help them strengthen their marriage by coaching them to deepen connection, improve communication, and apply tools needed to create the healthy marriage they envision and desire. Kameran is known for her authenticity, straightforward nature, and her ability to help couples with even the most complex of circumstances. She has a 93% success rate, so that's something to be thankful for and very proud of, I would think. Kameran, welcome to Not Just a Story. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Tell me a little bit about how you started on this journey of coaching married couples.
Yeah, so I actually changed my major 11 times in college and it went all over. I mean, everything from elementary education to like being a doctor to like marine biologist to wedding planner. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so when I had taught elementary education, I had been a kindergarten through second grade teacher for a little over a decade. I was good at it, but knew that that wasn't my calling for life. That wasn't like what I was supposed to be doing. And so I became a life coach before you could throw a rock and hit 5 life coaches kind of thing. And I had one lady that came to me and she said, I need you to coach our marriage. And if you don't, then we're going to get a divorce. And I said, well, it's not really what I do. And she said, it doesn't matter. If you don't coach us, we're getting a divorce. And so, no pressure there or anything. And so I was like, well, okay. So I took it on. I was like, well, I'll try it, but we'll see how it goes. And I loved it. And I actually started remembering that when I went back to what I was really passionate about, even in high school, I had wrote my senior term paper to graduate for my English class. We had to do a research paper and I did it on relationships that thrive. And so I went out into the community and actually interviewed couples that had been married for 30 years or longer and just asked them, like, what made your marriage thrive and how did you get to where you are and how have you stayed married and all of the things. And so that's what I should have just started with, Rose. Shouldn't have bothered changing my major 11 times. I should have just started with relationships. But yeah, so since then, that was about 9 years ago. And since then, it's what I've done. So
yeah, sometimes it takes a while to find out what you want to do. I mean, it took me until last year to figure out that this is what I want to do. I want to share people's stories and get them to have some impact in the world where their story may help someone else on their journey. So yeah, it took me quite a long time to find out that that's what I like doing. So yeah, so it doesn't matter how long you've changed and how many times you've changed until you can find what ticks your passion box.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, Vera Wang, gosh, she didn't even start designing wedding dresses until she was in her 40s. And
Mm.
I think, KFC, the Colonel Sanders guy, didn't even come up with the recipe for fried chicken until he was like 60 or 70. So,
Something like that.
like,
Yeah,
you just never know. You never know how long
absolutely.
it's going to take.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about what makes a good marriage.
Great question. They Dr. Gottman, if you're not familiar with Doctors John and Julie Gottman, they're relationship researchers. They're world renowned. They've got like 50 or 60 books. They're a married couple that have been studying marriage for somewhere around 40 to 50 years. And what they have found, and that's actually who my certification is through, is the Gottman Institute. And what they have found is that you really need three main things in order to make a marriage work. And so the building blocks of having a marriage are commitment, which I cannot teach you. You have to be all in on your marriage in order for it to work. And then trust is the second foundational wall that you have to this
Mm.
building, right? Well, trust a lot of times in relationships gets ruptured. I mean, even little things like if, your partner comes to you and says, "Hey, will you do X, Y, and Z?" And you're like, "Yep, I will get on that." And then you forget or you run out of time or, you didn't write it down and now it slips your mind or whatever. Now your partner's like, "Oh, but I asked you to do that. And now you said you would." And now, like, your trust breaks just a teeny tiny little
Mm.
bit there. Or it can break with really big things, cheating, lying, all of that. I read a study today that said that over 40% of relationships will experience infidelity of some type at
Mm.
some point in their marriage. That's huge. That's huge.
Absolutely.
So, that right there are the building blocks of your marital home. Okay. Now, what makes it a home versus a house is the most important thing that you can have for your relationship, and that's friendship. And that, when couples come to me, is one of the biggest things that are missing in their marriage. That
Mm.
it is the difference maker between do you drive up in the driveway and have to give yourself a 20-minute pep talk of like, okay, we're going to go in and it's going to be okay. And I only have 4 hours until bed, and part of that's going to be dinner. And then, tomorrow I get to leave again and go to work. Or is it you driving into the driveway and you can't wait to get inside? You can't wait to wrap your arms around your kids and your wife and or your husband or whomever because you like being home.
Mm.
It's your safe place. It's the place that you feel most cared about and loved, and it's a place of reprieve and not a place of stress. So all of that being said, it comes down to friendship. How do you speak to
Mm.
each other? How do you consider each other? How do you respect and love and care and honor and support and all of these things your partner? And do you do all of these things as well as you do with your best friend? And
Yeah,
so that is
sorry, I found looking from from the outside looking in from another marriages, they start when they're courting, everything's fine, they're really happy together, but as soon as they sign that marriage certificate, everything changes. Why is that?
yeah. It's a mindset. It's we emulate what we see growing up. And so it's this idea that like I have to find a spouse, I have to find a spouse, I have to find a spouse. Okay, now I found the spouse. We're not taught that your wedding is one day. We
Mm.
spend so much money on the one day of celebrating. Then we wake up the next day and it's like, well, now what? What do we do? And you just do the things that your parents did. Well, if your parents didn't have a great marriage, you're not going
Mm.
to have probably a great marriage because you didn't learn how to have that marriage. So it's this idea that dating actually sets the expectations for what marriage is going to be like. So
Mm.
if you're, as you should, having open-ended conversations, having hard conversations, working on your conflict resolution, you're doing things together, shared activities. That's also what needs to continue happening, even when you've got a mortgage and kids and the dog and, all the things. So that I think that's what's missing. But a lot of it too is the stages of marriage that we just naturally fall into. The honeymoon stage, and then we get into the power struggle stage. When you're in the thing about this, Rose, is that when we're in the dating stage, we're also fake to a certain extent. you don't want to tell your partner that you actually don't like pickles on your hamburger because, oh my God, what if they don't like me then? What if they stop loving me because I like pickles and they don't, or because, whatever. So you start being like, oh, you like that? Oh, I like that too. Or you want to do that? Sure, whatever's good with you. And
Mm.
really, that's not what you want to do. That's not, you're saying yes when you mean no, and you're
Yeah.
you're agreeing to things you don't, you know what I mean? You're putting your best foot forward all the time. Like you always pick your dirty clothes up and put them in the hamper before they come over. And then you get married and it's like, well, hold on now. That's why are your clothes all over the floor? I don't understand. Because you actually, the mask comes off
Yeah.
and you actually become more authentic. And that's also an issue.
Yeah, absolutely is absolutely. And how can we find emotional regulation? I mean, I know we should all have it when we before we get into the marriage and all that, but some people haven't learned to regulate their emotions, and this is where a lot of domestic violence and family violence comes into play because they're not in they can't control their emotions. They don't know how. They've never learned.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me laugh. That you're like, well, I know we should learn this. Yeah, well, ideally, we would become qualified to be in that marriage, but the reality of the situation is we don't. And so we grow up, and again, it's that emulating what you've seen. And so if you grew up in a household where your mom or your dad or both were yellers, you're going to automatically think yelling is normal.
Mm,
If you grow up seeing the doors being slammed or even hitting to an extent, you're going to either one of two things. We become a product of our environment, or become a product because of our environment.
mm,
So we're either going to do the exact same thing or we're going to do the opposite thing. And a lot of times studies show that people who grew up in households of abuse, that is the one thing that they will say is, I will never abuse my spouse or children. And then it happens and
mm,
it continues to happen. And it's like, why can't I stop? And so what we have to do is we have to actually start looking at and choosing our future. We have
mm,
to start looking at who we are and being very objective and honest about that. And then looking at who we want to be. And a lot of that is going to take some work. And sometimes, we think, oh, therapy is the only way. Well, if therapy isn't working for you, you're going to have to figure out a different way.
mm,
That's actually why I became a coach, because I don't fully agree with all of the modalities of therapy. Therapy's been around for almost 120 years, and
mm.
we are the sickest and the most mentally unhealthy we've ever been.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so,
Yep.
yeah. So there are other ways that we need to learn. And so, that being said, it's something that you have to be objective about. And you also have to listen to the people around you, because we're all a little bit nose blind to what we are as
Mm,
human beings. It's natural for us to think that we're doing better than what we really are. But if you keep hearing, hey, your anger issues are a problem, or hey, you're not emotionally available in this relationship, you have to start actually looking at that and being like, I'm the common denominator in those relationships. And I keep hearing this one thing. This is a weakness that I have that I need to turn into a strength. And you
yeah.
got to figure out who to do that. And that's what I help with.
Yeah, and it's a good point. I mean, children learn what they see and hear at
Hmm.
home, and I
Absolutely.
think part of the curriculum at school should be something to do with healthy boundaries and respectfulness, and
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
I think one of the European countries or Scandinavian countries teaches respectfulness as part of their school lessons, and I think that it would be helpful if the Western society, as in uh, Australia, US, UK, those types of people in Europe, would teach that at school as part of the school curriculum, because what you see at home, obviously, if it's uh, disruptive, that
Hmm.
if you learn respectfulness in another area, then you can make up your mind which one you want to
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
one you want to take after. And I think educators really need to look at that as part of ongoing um, teaching of our young kids, because it starts early. We need to get to them early, and yet in primary school.
For sure. And you know what people don't realize is that your subconscious is being formed from birth to 7 years old. It's formed by the time you are 7 years old. You're going to believe about 80% of what you know. And the thing is that, and I can only speak for the US, but the US tries to have the counselor come in and do like counseling lessons where you're learning some of this stuff. The problem, though, Rose, is a couple of different things. Number one, you've got a division in, and again, this is just the US, but the US teachers are looked at as like a glorified babysitter.
Yeah.
And so they don't, like, parents don't have that respect for the teachers. And so what's happening is these kids are coming home and being, oh, my teacher said that respectfulness is blah, 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 blah. And the parents are going, that's stupid. That's not what that, no, that's not real. That's whatever. You know what I mean? And so it's an undermining of what the teacher's teaching. But then also what's happening is that the teachers themselves are so bogged down. Like when I was a teacher, I had 28 kids in my classroom,
Yeah.
28 kindergartners, and no help. There's no aid, there's no paraprofessional that's helping, none of that. And so it's just figure it out. And so for that, it's almost like teachers are expected, and if teachers don't have that, themselves, how
Yeah.
are you going to teach something that you don't have? You know what I mean? So I also think that it should be, at least for the next couple of generations, it should be classes in college that you have to take and that you have to do that self work in order to learn it before you can even become a teacher, because that's really difficult to teach something that you don't know, don't believe in, don't have, etc. yourself.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Cameron. And I think you know, teaching it to others as part of the curriculum and can be helpful, but if you don't know it yourself, it's hard to be dedicated to that particular subject, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's talk about vulnerability and humility and self-accountability in
Yes.
marriage. How can we get those things and and foster them in our relationship?
Yeah, vulnerability and humility are two of my favorite things to talk about, as well as self-accountability. Self-accountability, this is okay. So self-accountability is really important because a lot of times what will happen, what I see in my practice is that couples will come to me and they have this idea that it's their partner's job to make them happy. So they will say things like, well, my marriage doesn't make me happy, or my partner doesn't make me happy. And if you are looking at your partner and saying that, you are selfishly requiring them to do something that you're not willing to do yourself.
Mm.
And so when it's also codependent, you are asking them to regulate your emotions. They don't have the same thoughts and feelings and experiences, education, and exposures that you do. So it's not their job to regulate your emotions. That's your job. That's your job to fill your cup so that then you can overflow onto everybody else. It's your job to be happy so that then you can, bring happiness to the home as well. So that's the first misconception, is that self-accountability is not really needed, that everyone is accountable for everyone. Well, no, you're accountable for you because you can't control other people.
Mm.
So that's first. And when you don't have self-accountability in a relationship, a lot of times what that looks like is a lack of humility. So if you're not able to take self-accountability, what's going to happen is you're going to end up blaming everything on your partner. Well, if you wouldn't have done this, then I wouldn't have said that. No. Let's try that again. You have control over you. So even if they are doing the most diabolical things on the planet, you still can, have agency in how you respond to that or whether you react. So there's that. But also, humility is really important because humility allows you to also be vulnerable. And when you have humility and vulnerability and self-accountability, these are emotional intimacy.
Mm.
What we do not realize is that we cannot have great physical intimacy. Anybody can have sex. Sex is just sex, right? You can't have that mind-blowing fireworks experience that you want in the bedroom that brings connection to both partners unless you have emotional intimacy. Now, what people don't realize is for women, we have to have that before we can actually open up and get out of our head long enough for that bedroom experience. But men actually get that emotional intimacy through like it's like 80% of it is done outside of the bedroom, and then that last 20% they get through that sexual experience. And so that's why all of these one night stands, we as a human race are looking for that connection and that emotional intimacy. And we're having all of these one night stands hoping for that experience to give us what we're looking for. And that's when we wake up the next morning being like, well, that was a bust. I didn't get what I was looking for. Well, yeah, because you don't have that vulnerability and that humility that you can open up and say, yeah, I get why that would be really hard for you, because it was hard for me too. I understand why you're making mistakes, because I make mistakes too. Oh, you think that's embarrassing? Like, don't even worry about it. That is not a big deal. Here's what happened to me, right? You always feel more open and more like less alone, more connected to someone who is sharing their hard times with you, who's sharing their stress with you. You don't feel connected to somebody who's like, oh, I don't know what that's like. I've never had that experience before. Whereas with somebody that has, you're like, man, this is my soulmate. I've been looking for this my whole life. And here they are in front of me. And so that's why it's so important in a marriage, because it gives you that connection and that emotional intimacy that you're looking for. And without those three, you're never going to find it. And this is the other thing, is that when you have an attachment style that's, say, dismissive avoidant, you grew up thinking that your emotions or your feelings didn't matter, or that you had to go to your room in order to quote unquote be good, and then you could come back out and join the rest of the family once you had yourself regulated. Well, as a child, you don't know how to do that. So then being vulnerable, you have this idea that you're going to be rejected. So you don't want to be vulnerable. And you certainly don't want to be humble, because you have to be quote unquote look like you're good all the time. And that's the thing, is that we all want to be loved, but you can't be fully loved unless you're fully known. And you can't be fully known unless you're vulnerable. So, yeah, vulnerability, humility, self accountability, massively important to having a great relationship.
Absolutely, I totally agree, and I think that if you've gone through a marriage, a lengthy marriage, and none of those things were available to you, it makes you think that there's something wrong with you, when in fact there's really nothing wrong. It's just the relationship.
Yeah, everything in relationships comes back to both partners' self beliefs that are trauma influenced from birth to like 25, till that prefrontal cortex is completely developed. The self beliefs that we have then create filters for us, which then create feelings and emotions. And then what we end up seeing are the behaviors that come because of all of those self beliefs and things that we haven't worked through. And what we find, especially what I found in my practice, is that it's all hypocritical, that we're judging our partner for having certain self beliefs and for acting a certain way, when we do the exact same thing. It just looks a little bit different, but we don't realize it's the exact same thing. Both of it comes down to we both miss each other, or both of it comes down to we don't feel good enough for the other one, or we don't believe that good things can happen to us, or we can't trust anyone, not just our partner, but anyone in general. Like all of these different self beliefs, it all comes back to those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. That comes from whatever you're taught to believe as a child, and growing up through your teen years, especially when starting to have relationships with others.
Yep.
And the self belief can be distorted along the way,
Yeah.
because what other people have told you how you should be.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Cameran, would you like to share anything else with us today?
I think the only thing that I really want to get out to your listeners is that your relationship is never too far gone. If you are married, and especially if you have children, your relationship is always fixable if both people in the relationship want to fix it and want to grow. The question is not, can the relationship survive, or is the relationship going to work? It's, do you want to do the work to make the relationship grow with this other person?
Mm.
And if you want to grow yourself and you want to do the work with this other person, it absolutely can.
Yep.
I have worked with some of the absolute craziest stories where you're like, there is no way that that couple should have worked. And they do, because they do the work together. And that's the point of marriage. Not happiness is a byproduct of that. The
Mm.
real reason that we get married is for growth.
Yes. Yep. No, I agree. Where can people find you, Kameran?
Great question. At married.and.connected on Instagram. Pretty much all platforms I'm on. I'm at Married and Connected, or some form of married.and.connected. My website is the only thing that's different. It's www.recognizingpotential.com. And my own podcast. Every Monday I drop an episode. It's called Married and Connected.
Wonderful. Kameran, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing with us today about how we can have a great marriage in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Not Just a Story with Rose Davidson. If something in this episode stayed with you, you're invited to reflect on your own story, in your own way, in your own time. And if you feel ready, you can share your story through the Impactful Voice Project at rosedavidson.com.au. This is a space where lived experience is honored and stories are shared with care. Until next time, your story matters.